last week as well as this week. We have a special guest in the building right now. So for those of you who are watching live, we appreciate you guys for tuning in as well. And for those of you who are listening on TDS Radio, you can always go to TDS Media, our YouTube, to catch the interview there, so you can see our guest's lovely face there. But as I said, it is Women Impacting Now, our WIN series, and we have Lauren McCullough in the building. Hey, how you doing, honey? I'm so glad. So glad you came. I appreciate you. This woman is on fire. So let's start with the simple fact that she has two startups, not just one, because we all know one is enough. But she said, let's push the envelope a little bit more and do two. So you have Tromml, and then you have Aurora Flow. But before we get into talking about your businesses, because you're doing all things awesome, let's touch a little bit about your background and how you are essentially, you came from tech, correct?
Yeah. So pretty much my whole professional career didn't start this way. I started, everyone goes to college thinking you know what you're going to do.
Right.
I quickly found out that even though I had this desire to work in nonprofit, public advocacy space, I had very little patience. And so I think when you find out in your early part of your career that you have no patience and don't really, I'm not very good at bullying, I tell people. So you kind of think, entrepreneurship, probably a slightly better route for that, right? Hold the pace a little bit yourself. And so I spent pretty much the whole, portion of my career, the last decade, working in startups, working with startups. My last kind of official job was in more of a support role. And what I realized during that time is I loved what I did, but I was, going about 2 inches with every company. And I wanted to really, see what my entrepreneurial pursuit could kind of take if I really put my full-time effort into it. And then I kind of built a company.
Absolutely. And that's honestly, that is probably one of the dopest things that I can hear someone say, to, essentially take on that role of helping other startups, because it's a beast, and one thing that we do know is that we all need help when it comes to, just branching out on our own. So what essentially made you want to say, okay, well, I'm going to start with Tromml?
Yeah. So, it zigzags as most journeys do. So when I left that last support role, I had been kind of positioning myself as being a fractional resource for growth-oriented B2B SaaS startups. It's kind of my little niche of the world. And one of the things I kind of realized I was filling a gap for is, hey, I'm a founder. I'm doing all the sales and marketing for my business. I can't do it anymore. Yet when I try to hire someone, they say, well, where's my onboarding process, right? Where's my playbook of how to do this successfully? And that doesn't exist.
Right.
So when you come in and fill that time gap, that helps people put process and really their entire infrastructure into place from a growth perspective, it really allows them to actually bring people on successfully. So I like to fill that little gap. And joined one of the startups that I was in and spent a couple of years growing that company from about, I think we were doing 4,000 or 5,000 a month when I started, and I think when I left we were about 70. So I was able to take that journey in a couple of years. And that's kind of where I found my love for the e-com space, e-com tech space, because it's talk about things that change fast, right? Like tech in general is doing that, but there's nothing that fluctuates and has as much uncertainty, I think, in the growth of e-commerce.
Right.
And e-commerce technology is so fascinating because it creates all these different components that we don't always think about. Oh, what did it take for me to get that cell phone case on my doorstep from Amazon that I just ordered at DM last night? Like a lot of people don't really think behind the scenes. You're just like, great, instant gratification. Arrived on time, goodbye. And there's a lot that goes on in the behind the scenes in that. And one of the industries my last startup had really found its niche in was in the automotive industry, which I like cars, I think they're pretty cool, but
they're necessary.
They're necessary, right? Like we have bad public transportation here. If anyone's listening that can control that. So, it was an interesting industry. And what I liked about it is it was a big data problem, because typically to be successful in that industry, we only have like so many different cell phones that exist. There's a lot of different types of cars.
Right.
And so all these different parts fit all these different cars. So to be successful selling these parts online, you have to sell a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
And a lot of logistics. And it's just hugely inefficient industry by most means. And so that was a big problem we were solving in my last company, is how do you streamline and automate these things that are typically been done for a manual task. And when I left that last company, one of my colleagues and I there had been very good friends. And one of the problems we kept hearing people say was, oh man, I wish I knew what parts of my business were doing well and what. Right. Like where are their fires? I can't find them. And when things go wrong until it's too late. Oh my gosh, I made a pricing error and I just lost $40,000. So I have to either lose $40,000 or lose my premier status on eBay, which is $100,000, right? So you have these compromises that you're making just because in the pursuit of expanding your reach in the market, you just created piles and mountains of data. And so Tromml is really here to serve that customer at its core. So what we're doing is helping bring together all the different data they have and basically raising to the surface what are the little gold nuggets. So a Tromml is a piece of equipment in a gold mining operation that helps sort through the dirt and find little gold nuggets. And so that's essentially the kind of metaphor we're using for this. Is okay, we help you find those tiny little gold nuggets within this mountain of data so you can not have those lost times that go into bankruptcy for your company, but then also so you can actually find how to grow strategically because there's gold insights in that too.
Absolutely. So the awesome thing about this is, just essentially helping people, like you said, find those golden nuggets and really fine tune their systems, because we all know systems are very important in organizations that people tend to want to ignore because they want to get to the finish line. But one of the things that I want to hear from you about, Erica, who was last Rocket Home last week, she talked about how some people didn't necessarily trust her when she was going into some of these rooms, because number one, she is a woman, and they might have to essentially see your background of, do you know exactly what you're doing? Because you're coming in as a consultant, people don't trust consultants, they want them to look a certain type of way. What have you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, working in tech in general, right? No matter what you're doing, it's hard. I think the benefit we have with my specific customer base is that we're not going into boardrooms, we're going to small business owners. And you can get that trust and rapport, I think, a little bit quicker. But what I found, like when I was doing sales for this, is you had to really jump the gun on your authority. Like where everyone else just, there's an assumption of authority. I think for women, we don't get that. So I always kind of say, like, you demand attention and command respect.
Absolutely.
And because you can't demand respect. Like you have to earn that and stuff like that, but you do have to be really loud and you do have to kind of cut in front of the rooms. And I think that that's just the role females have to take where we are right now, is you have to be a little bit louder and a little bit more brazen. And some people are going to get turned off by that, and you'll get, slurs and stuff that maybe our male colleagues wouldn't, but it's really the only way is, I think, to demand that attention. And then you have to just be incredibly confident.
Absolutely.
Right? Like you don't get this buffer, right? Like I think a lot of times men will enter the room, especially like older guys that have like this essence of authority and knowledge, right? They don't know anything potentially about what they're speaking to, yet people just assume credibility.
Right.
So the first thing you have to do is like hit people with things and kind of impress them off the bat. What I have found is that when you get that and you can cross that line, you can use. Because I did that when I was consulting with my clients too. Because I would show up and, like, oh, who's this, girl in her 20s trying to get me to pay her a bunch of money to give advice a couple times a month. And I had to just like create impact. And so I always think about value creating activities. If you spend 5 minutes or 50 minutes together, you're going to walk away a little smarter than you came into this conversation. And I think that's really the only way to keep that perspective on the ground level.
Absolutely. And when it comes to just you as an individual, some people have a hard time with finding their voice. They have a hard time of really exuding that confidence, because it's just like, well, what if people second guess me? What if they ask me a question I don't know? They're overthinking.
Yeah.
So where did you find that power?
I playing boys sports growing up. I mean, I was like, honestly, I joke about it, but I was an athlete growing up, and I did disproportionately play on boys teams, and I think I was just always really reason about like finding my place and finding my voice. And you end up in this imposter syndrome. But I kind of noticed really, young into my career and even probably growing up, is that like the moment I started second guessing myself and feeling too much imposter syndrome, I was like just doing such a net negative to myself. And so it was like a thing I disciplined myself. It's like, okay, you can feel that way, but you can't show it.
Right.
You can't show it. You can't show it. And I kind of have just always taken that approach. And I think that's just why female entrepreneurs can be so successful sometimes, though, because there is that little fire in you, and that same fire that brought you towards entrepreneurship is the same fire that is allowing you to not let the fact that you've been mansplained for the last 10 minutes about the thing you're an expert in deter you from doing what you do.
Exactly. And that's a good point to even touch on. And I have a few questions that you even possibly kind of hinted at, but we'll get to them a little bit later, especially about community, mansplaining, things like that, and finding that voice. But we do have to take a quick break. So once again, make sure you guys are tuning into TDS Radio so you can hear the music. We, of course, will still continue to be live, so you'll get a little background info here. And just keep it locked right here. TDS Radio, a voice for culture. That is I know a lot of people are still waiting for that good golden email to say that they're able to purchase theirs. I'm still waiting. I feel some sort of way because time is ticking and I will not be in attendance, but we'll just put it out there that the tickets are waiting for me. It's just I just need that email. But if you guys have been listening, which I hope you were, we are kicking off and have been doing our W.I.N series, Women Impacting Now, an awesome series where we're just highlighting various women in the community. So for those of you who are listening on TDS Radio, you can join us on YouTube and watch there. For those of you watching, you can listen on TDS Radio through our Live 365 app to check out the music there. So when we take our break. But we want you guys to be encouraged to ask questions. You know, Lauren is not going to bite, I promise you. She's a wealth of knowledge, and especially when it comes to stepping out on your own and being an entrepreneur. If you have any questions, she's been in the game. She's helping other startups to kind of get where they need to get. So any questions that you may have, definitely drop them in the comment section. And we can read them off here and get those answers for you. So before we took a break, we were just talking about taking up space as a woman, you know, an entrepreneur in the tech field where it is male dominating. Like you said, people are mansplaining to you, and you have a wealth of knowledge, but they might not necessarily treat you that way because they've been in these positions. They've got, you know, the title. So for someone to come into the room and tell them like, you might be doing this wrong because of what you look like, that can be tough. And the other thing that can be tough is just stepping into the entrepreneurial world. So how do you keep yourself motivated?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I used to tell people when I was doing more consulting work, I said, if you're in this just economically, I think that if you start a business just to get rich, that's a terrible way to get rich, right? You can definitely do better other ways. And I think that that's such an artificial value that it doesn't allow you to get through those times. But I think about starting a business as value creating activities, right? The value I'm creating for my customers, making their lives better, my family's life better, my employees' life better. And when I come home with the, I guess sometimes weight, but sometimes the, I guess kind of momentum behind that, I think that's what allows you to get through when things are like really hard. And like, sometimes you come home and you just need to cry and yell and like work some things out because it's not easy. None of this is easy. But I do think that when you remember the things that you're creating around you and the spaces that you're changing and making better and more efficient. Like I kind of joke, you know, being in software is a great goal is to make sure that your customer doesn't have to miss their kid's soccer game anymore. Right. So when you realize that like, oh my gosh, like I work with a small business and now this person can actually go on vacation and not worry about checking their email every hour.
Right.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Right. Or I think for me, the most proud day as an employer will be when someone on my team comes and is like, because of the job you created, I bought a home today. Right. Like it's not about, I don't know, some of the things just feel so artificial compared to those like very meaningful things. And I think that just really can help you sustain through the rough stuff.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that, you know, you are married, so you have a support system there. But the one thing that I definitely want to touch on when it is being a woman, being an entrepreneur, community. We rely on our community a lot. So who is your community? You know, where do they essentially kind of feed you and fill your cup when you feel like your cup is just running low?
Yeah, I think that it's really important, and this, regardless of what you do, right? You want to have your work colleagues, but then you want to have people who are like not your work colleagues who kind of get what you're doing. So maybe if you're a nurse, you want to talk to other people who are, I don't know, doing different types of healthcare, right? Or different types of front of the line things. And I find the same thing is, for me, like I try to think about that with my friend groups and my social circles and stuff. So I certainly surround myself with other founders. But if I'm spending all my time around other founders, then I'm just like, because I can talk shop all day. So then I'm like drowning in it a little bit too much. So I can kind of come out here to my other networks and say, okay, we can just talk about like working really hard, trying to make our lives a little bit better. And I think I try to be mindful of what space I'm creating and not letting them leak. But I do like the fact that like, you know, I have a sports family. My wife is super supportive of everything I've done. And I have like such a good friend group here. But like, being part of American Underground for me has been huge because this has actually been part of my community since I moved to Durham about 7 or 8 years ago. And it's something I've always maintained, even when I've had jobs that don't require office space at American Underground. I've just paid for my membership because it's kind of my people, because I know regardless of what's going on, I can come here and find someone here who can empathize. And so spaces like AU, I think, are kind of essential parts of the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Shout out to AU, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to touch back on is the fact that you are in business with your wife, you know, which there can be good and bad with that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And your business is Aurora Flow.
Yep.
And you guys do an array of things from waxing to Reiki to massages, but just making people feel safe, especially people in the LGBTQIA community and people of color, but then making sure that people take care of themselves.
Yep.
And I think one of the important things that we have learned coming out of a pandemic, and still technically in one, even though we don't want to believe that we are, is making sure that people maintain their mental and physical health. So how do you do that with two stars?
Yeah, great question. If anyone has advice, I'd appreciate it. I think for me, like I've kind of thrown myself into activities, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But for me, I like my mind can get very manic, and so my mind will start like racing, and trying to balance that part of my mental health. You know, in addition to like talking professionally about that, is trying to figure out, okay, where do I feed my energy that works a different part of my brain? And so like I joined this bowling league last fall, and it's like my favorite thing. I'm like, I don't feel like this is the greatest thing I've ever done. Like this bowling league is my favorite because it's so fun. It's community. It's like, it's just the right level of competitive, right? Because it's a handicap league, so you have to get better. And it's just such a great activity because you have to focus a little. So I have to like leave work behind when I go. And that's what I find too, because I also rock climb. And so I find when I'm there, it's a similar event, right? It's like, it's pretty chill. I can kind of go my own pace, come and go as I please. When I'm there, you've got to leave things behind.
Right.
And I think that that's the important part, is like creating those spaces when you, like, there's certain activities I don't think would do it for me, right? Because I would still be mulling them over in my mind.
Right.
Like I even find it's hard to run now because I'm like racing thoughts in my head. But there's these certain things that you have to focus enough that it really takes that out. And I think those activities can be really helpful. And, you know, also just like breaking apart your day.
Yeah.
Like I've really been trying to get in a better habit as it gets warmer, as it was warmer, of like, you know, just taking a midway walk. And I'm fortunate that Aurora Flow is about, you know, 10-minute walk down the street. So I'll like walk down and check in on things. But really the power of that isn't visiting, it's just being able to take the walk there.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you're at a point where you can realize when you need to step away and unplug. Because I think that is an issue that some people going into being an entrepreneur or having a startup where they don't know when to stop.
Oh, yeah.
And that causes burnout.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, you know, like I'm a travel person. So like running a couple businesses and traveling doesn't usually complement each other on the surface, but it's actually, I think, one of the most powerful things as a business owner you can do, because it tests what needs you.
Oh,
like I think that if you start a business from the beginning, you should start to think about, how do I get this business to run without me? And what's helpful is, so like we're going on like a 5-day trip to Puerto Rico in a month. And part of the thing I want to do is like, what went wrong when I had to leave? And there will be certain days where I'll say, don't contact me unless it's an emergency today. And what's helpful is, one, our team gets empowered to realize, oh, I can problem solve perfectly fine. Second of all, everything's fine. Like what really is going to go wrong?
Exactly.
One day someone blew a breaker. That was the only day that like things were really crazy, but people figure it out, right? And then you also can recognize, oh, when I left, that, you know, I didn't realize I wasn't delegating someone to pay the bills. If I want to run this business and not have it run me, I need to have someone to delegate that. And then all of a sudden you start growing this business that allows you to actually have the lifestyle, which is probably why you started that business in the first place. And I think the earlier you do that, the better, because people who wait too long to do it, man, you get entrenched and you can never get out. So I think that like even if it's just 3-day trips at a time, there's a program that actually teaches this model. Well, I can run like clockwork. And the whole thing is, at the end of it, you get to take a month vacation. Just completely unplugged. But it does these little tests throughout it. And I've read it and I use little elements of that. And so I'm excited to go on this trip because I'm going to say, what went wrong?
Exactly.
And again, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, that is awesome. And how long did it take you to get to that point? Because I'm pretty sure it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Aurora Flow is only open in December, so we're still pretty young. I think for me, it's been more that I got to take some shortcuts because I saw this rodeo so many times. Like I've probably worked with, if I think about 30 minutes or more, I've probably interacted with 500 to 700 startups at least over this period of time. That's probably way under. And so I see what makes people successful, what makes people burn out. Sometimes it's hard to embody it a little bit myself. but at least that I like feel like I know the game plan and it's about executing. And that part about people who were just so poor delegating, so stubborn about creating process and systems and letting things go and realizing like, yeah, I'm going to delegate this, and just because it's not done the way that I would have done it doesn't make it wrong, right? And I have to like, because I have a pretty high standard for things, so I have to remind myself of that too sometimes. It's like, okay, just because they didn't do it the way I did, it's just different, right? And maybe I can say my way was like better, but that's an arbitrary statement, right? And it also is like never going to allow you to start delegating things in your business. And at Aurora Flow, we want to scale, we want to grow to multiple locations, so that's almost a requirement for us to figure that out.
Absolutely. So I have one more question for you, but we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll also let everyone know how they can find you, how they can essentially get in touch with you if they are looking for your expertise, which I would say you might want to go ahead and do that. But we are going to be right back. Make sure you guys keep it locked. Go ahead and check us out, PBS Radio, so you can listen to the jams, and then we will be back with more with Lauren. Fab Coach Block here. And as you guys know, we are in the middle of our W.I.N series. That's Women Impacting Now. We're talking to Lauren McCullough of Tromml and Aurora Flow. Awesome, just really dropping gems here. I'm so glad that we are recording this. If you guys are listening on the radio station, just go to TDS Media, because you can always watch the playback of the interview. But this is really good and vital information for anyone who is considering stepping into being an entrepreneur, or even some sort of assistance when it comes to startups, getting on that team. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think what Lauren is telling us, or even teaching us today, is just kind of how to ease your process into it. It's not going to be easy, but there are some, little nuggets that she has that can really help. So you just don't feel like you're completely thrown to the side with what you're going to experience. So one of the other questions that I had for you before we wrap up was networking and mentorship. How effective, or how much did it help, or did you have any mentors when it came to you wanting to step out on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really someone who ever gravitated towards one mentor, but I think it's the same reason I was never someone growing up where it's I have that one best friend. I was I have this tight group of people that I can trust and rely on that have different perspectives, because I think I really value that. And so I have probably 10 people that, depending on what I'm stuck on, what I need, I can kind of call on at any time. I know they've always had my back. And I think for me, honestly, building my network has kind of been everything. And also, whether it's because I created it or because I got lucky, I don't know, but the opportunities that I've gotten in life have all been because of that. And all because I've asked. Sometimes it's just for asking for help. I didn't come from money or a networked family or really anything that gave me access.
Right.
I created access.
Absolutely.
And so when I went to college, I said yes to probably too many things to make allies and to make friends and opportunities. And when I came to Durham, I didn't know anyone. And so I would just show up. We had startup weekends that were super active at the time, and I would just show up. I'd just run them at my old job, but I would just go to meet people and network. And every time someone says, "Oh, I can introduce you to this person," just say yes. I mean, there becomes a limit where that's not feasible anymore, but taking advantage of those things and actually acting upon them means a lot to people, because a lot of times when people are connected, they'll offer something up and no one will grab it.
Absolutely.
And so then they're I'm not going to offer you something again. Right? So you have to be mindful if you're going to, and sometimes you can just decline the offer. I really appreciate that, but I'm a little tapped out right now. And I think that that's really created every opportunity I've ever had. My past job, the one I mentioned kind of before I went out on my own, most of my job was to create networks with the entrepreneurial community. That was a huge part of it. And what was cool is I got to spend 3 years just building my network all over North Carolina in the entrepreneurial community. And that has continued to serve me well, but I take it really seriously. So when I'm called upon to ask for things, I do as much as I can. I wish I could say yes more. I have had to say no more recently, but I always try to, pay it forward as much as you can, because that's what people remember.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And before you go, 2 things. Number 1, what advice, or what is something that you would say to someone who is in it? They're grinding out, in their startup, in their entrepreneurial journey. And what would you say to them?
Never stop talking to your customers, ever. Directly to their faces with their words. You have to interact with people, because even if you're at the top, if you're disconnecting yourself from that, you lose so many insights. At Aurora Flow, the most powerful thing I can do for our business is work our front desk and talk to our customers, because if you want to understand how to shape and grow your businesses, you need to have that relationship on the ground forever.
You wait till I talk to my company. I'll be like, Lauren said. And then also let people know how they can find you, how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah. So you can find Aurora Flow. We're super active on Instagram, so that's a great way to find us. AuroraFlowMassage.com is our website. AuroraFlow.com our website. Aurora Flow Massage is our Instagram. For me, I'm probably easiest to find on my LinkedIn. You can grab me on there. I'm the girl with the motorcycle. The blonde motorcycle on LinkedIn is how people typically brand me. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren.
Yeah,
you've been a joy, and you are now officially a part of the TDS family.
Awesome.
So whenever you want to come and rock out with us, hang out with us, or even just drop a few golden nuggets, we're here for you.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we're going to take a quick break, guys, and we will be back. Remember, it's Talk That Stuff Tuesday, and we will have the guys from the LOI, the show, the podcast coming up in the 7 o'clock hour. So keep it locked right here. CBS, our voice, our culture.